Hello everyone, my name's Laura Thompson and it is a pleasure to host this week's Lunch and Learn webinar 28. As part of the Summer School 2020 series, we've been looking at a series of books, and today the final part of the series is the bestseller by leadership coach Kim Scott and her book Radical Candor, which was the second most recommended book to me from people that had read it over the last couple of years. So what a one to end on. The most recommended one was Obstacle is the Way. Okay, so let me now share screen. And let's begin. Oh, hang on a minute, sorry. What's that? About yesterday's Zoom. Okay, look, it's not you, it's me. Okay, look, I'll put it all on an email. This new world. We're not going to maybe bump into each other in the office and deal with some of these gnarly conversations that might need dealing with. So what will communication techniques and tactics that we think are going to be fit for the 2020s? Not only have we got the most biggest amount of transformation happening in our society and the way in which we work, but our ability to actually touch and connect with each other has completely changed. So based on the idea of a business book club, the goal for this summer was to think, whilst we're sort of in summer mode and having to think about what this next emerging version of life will be like ahead of us, why don't we take some time to see if we can emerge just a little bit more clued up about some of the tried and tested techniques that have been out there and some of the best-selling leadership and workbooks, and also maybe just remixing them a little bit, because anything that's got a publication date pre-February 2020 feels like it was almost written a world ago. So this one we've been looking at, the final part of our series, is Kim Scott's Radical Candor, how to be a great boss without losing your humanity, which always stuck with me in terms of really interesting the impact technology has on our ability to connect and engage with each other. So much has changed. Oh, for many of us, it feels like we're starting out again. So what do we do? Well, in series 5, it's been all about a bit more of a longer, less tangible, but hopefully you'll find some of the tips at the end, a practical way to begin to think about how to put this into practice. And we've selected 6 topics that we think are going to be instrumental for the future. These are the things to get on a teenager's CV right now in terms of what will be the most skills, we call it with the shelf life: leadership, resilience, careers, culture, teamwork, and today about communication. So the new decade is going to see a shift to virtual, the ability to build trust, engage, and deal with conflict towards positive resolution over voice and video alone is going to be a valuable skill. It's tiring to have a day of video meetings at home, and boundaries can slide, so things can maybe upset us or trigger us more than they would in a real world environment because we haven't got the physical commute to be able to sort of come down from that high. Discussions can be noisier because we don't know when we can interrupt and guide some of those conversations to a smoother transition. So it requires a real set of tactics to be able to handle dominant personalities. There's a classic myth, I don't know if you've ever caught this before, apparently it was completely made up, but it's a nice story about a translation of radio contact between 2 ships out in the ocean, and one ship is asking the other one to move and the other one is saying we are unable to move, and this kind of conflict ramps up and you can see it in the transcript. What transpired is actually one of them was a lighthouse, so it wasn't being obstinate, it wasn't a boat that could move, it literally was a lighthouse. And it's a fun way of explaining if either side are refusing to budge, where does that kind of get you? What happens online when we're unable to use some of the body language techniques we might have learned over the years to be able to shift things on? And dodging stuff and not addressing stuff can be actually more exhausting than dealing with something in the first place. There's so much going on at the moment, lots of waves of change that are occurring. So let's remix some of the more established world of assertiveness, because for X amount of years there's been lots of books about this, but how might we bring this to life in the world of virtual communication? So the first book we looked at was Humankind, which is like a warm bath in the glow of humanity. If you need to be cheered up right now, that's one of the most motivating books I've ever read, and it really helped sort my head out at the time I read it about 7 weeks ago. If you need a little bit of grit, and it's about looking into life's obstacles as a learning opportunity as opposed to a backward step, this is a fantastic book. This is like a salt scrub for your morale, this Obstacle is the Way book. If you're thinking that you're either rethinking yourself and your own plans, either chosen or forced upon you, or maybe you're guiding and supporting those around you in your family or professional network to think a bit differently about opportunities ahead. These are two really fascinating books looking at, actually, we're living for longer than any other previous generation. So a 60-year career plan might be quite the norm, which would have been astonishing to our grandparents. And actually the way in which we'll be earning money and who will be paid what, could potentially a scaffolder be earning more on the outside of the side scraper, because you're unable to automate that role right now, more maybe than the automatable role that's inside, that's the legal profession, for example. Really fascinating in terms of that. We then looked at, okay, well, what does this mean in terms of creating cultures that are fit for the 2020s? And rather controversially, I found that the book that had been published by Simon Sinek, who is so fab at articulating things really clearly. For me, I felt there was a bit of a miss there, because the Infinite Game was all about having sustainable cultures and making long-term decision making. And not once was there a reference to technological disruption, fourth world revolution in terms of machines, etc. And which actually I think is one of the biggest challenges we're going to have, which is how do we have sustainable long-term business that incorporates the best bits of machines and the best bits of humans. So actually, by mixing it up a little bit with The Rise of the Robots, which was a real startling book when it was published a couple of years ago, that was quite an interesting way, hopefully, to look at what does it mean in terms of workplace cultures. Last week we looked at Dare to Lead, which was a lovely little stiletto-heeled kick up the rear that just kind of gets you thinking, right, actually, one life, etc. Let's be daring, let's be brave. And then today is looking at, all right, what does that mean in terms of conversations, in terms of the way we interact with each other? So we'll be looking at her key things, which is she describes the need to care personally, challenge directly. And for her, that is the sweet spot in terms of balancing how to be a great boss and contributing to whatever family we might be talking about, corporate, domestic, personal, professional. Her background is that she's worked for Google, I think for Apple as well. So I found her really interesting, the way that she brought her language to life, because it really felt like she'd cut her teeth in very innovative, fast-paced organisations. So it really worked for me in terms of the anecdotes and examples she gave. So as communication is likely to retain its premium in the decade ahead, we're going to be looking at, in this virtualised decade, what is the role of communication? What might that mean for me? What is the best-selling book in a nutshell? Radical Candor. So we get the 5 disruptive thoughts out, and then a bit of a list at the end as some attempt of thinking, well, what might be some practical ideas for bringing these fresh communication principles to life? So let's just rewind the clock. Why are we even doing this in the first place? Well, a gentle reminder from nature, it shows us all around the harsh reality of how come some species thrive through rapid change and some species wither and die out. And if we were to apply as a metaphor nature to humans, what might that mean in terms of being able to thrive as we evolve really quickly through these kind of changing times? And if you're looking for a 4-letter word beginning with F at the moment to be able to describe how you're feeling, maybe it's time to flux it, which is we are having to be so flexible, it is beyond flexible. I mean, I've been flexible for 20 odd years since I entered the world of work in the year 2000. This is another level. So for me, the word flexible wasn't a durable enough word to be able to describe all of the stuff that was going on. What a commotion we have been experiencing. And actually, when things are in a state of flux, which is the scientific term for unset and kind of going with the flow, we almost have to be flexible. So my preference would be to have a fully stocked schedule of events over the next 3 months, pending worldwide close down, pending schools going back, and pending all of these things that are completely out of one individual's control. At times like this, then, it might be useful for me to channel the fox part of my mindset as opposed to the panda mindset, if we were to take the transfer from nature. Because what Darwin would suggest is that the rate of internal change, as long as it matches the rate of external change, is actually the secret of survival of the fittest. I don't have to be the smartest, most intellectual, the quickest, but as long as I'm adaptable enough to be able to clock what's going on over there and what that might mean for me here, then the more proactive and catered for by the environment I'm able to be. And the sad thing for a poor panda is it's kind of bogged down and constrained by very inefficient processes. It can't handle any diversity, it can only eat bamboo, and unfortunately bamboo is really low in calorific value, so it's stuck eating for 18 hours a day, chomping through this low value stuff. Whereas a fox can eat anything. So it can learn to hunt, it can learn to forage, doesn't matter how it's been raised, it's forever sniffing out what might be some opportunities and threats that are out there to be able to have a rethink about it. It's still a fox though, so its values haven't changed. It's just the way in which it goes about its business has changed a bit. So we might have to make it up as we flow, and this might require a new plan. And for those of us who like a plan that gets PDF'd really quickly, well, we might have to un-PDF it again, because things are likely to change. It's only the next normal. It's time to be flexible. So what does this mean in terms of me being able to flux with the people that I work with and communicate in a way that means we're able to actually achieve something? Check this out. This has been going decades, this illusion has been in place. So one way you look at it, it might look like an old woman. The other way you look at it, it looks like a young woman. I think we all have learned over the last couple of months the power of a camera angle in terms of how it can shift a stone in one angle, or it can add a stone depending on where that camera angle is. But this is when it started to become of interest to the psychologists out there about how people perceive things online. So remember this? This is from 2015. It went viral on Instagram, and it was actually one of the things that really started to kick off visual things going viral. So it was the dress, and depending on what color you saw that dress, so I clearly see it as gold and white, but I have had really long drawn out conversations with family members who clearly see it as black and blue. And it's hilarious to run it on an online team events. Half the people will see it one set and half the people see the other set. The truth of it actually is, it is black and blue. But what happens is that the pixels and the way in which my rods and cones in my eyes determine it is different from if we were both sitting there in the same, looking at it in the flesh. So there's something about the screen that means the perception of it completely changes the shade and the colour of what I think we're looking at that's the same. So transfer that across to maybe an set of emotions in a conversation. I might leave that conversation thinking, cool, that was a bit out of order, a bit strong. And the other person might leave the conversation going, finally, someone's actually called it out and spoken about what's going on. Our perception of it might be completely different. And of course, what's different now is we're not all having a chat in the same coffee room after. Potentially, we're dealing and processing with that conversation on our own. And things might either grow bigger or diminish depending on my emotional state in that moment. How important is this to have a think about communication in the 2020s? Well, at the end of last year, there were 7.6 billion active Internet of Things devices, things talking to things connected. That's more than there are humans on the planet. The prediction is that figure is going to grow to 24 billion in 2030. So our children turn 18 in the year 2030. That's when they'll be looking for work. What will it look like now in terms of the working landscape then? And the expectation is that will generate $1.5 trillion in annual revenue. And just as a comparison with that, if you were to sell all of the UK property in one go, it'd be worth £2.3 trillion, I remember reading. So that's our physical property, and this is then online each year, the revenue that will expected to come through. Wow, we've got some big opportunities and changes ahead of us. So maybe it's time to think about how we stage our natural first impressions. And I was trying to find some interesting research about, in terms of plastic surgery waiting lists, have things shifted from tummy tucks to teeth and facial enhancements, but I can't find that stats anywhere. But certainly the need to breathe in has changed when you're working virtually, and the need to maybe think about hair and face and all that kind of stuff has increased. And in fact, clients I work with who sell beauty products, things have shot through the roof in terms of enhancers and blushers and blenders and all that kind of stuff. Because in the first 3 seconds, we're gaining attention. And in a real world, people might glance at someone's shoes to work out what their standards and ethics are. But now, actually, you could be wearing whatever shoes you want or no shoes. We're not going to see it. So in that kind of 30 seconds where we're maintaining interest about each other and thinking, yeah, I think they're talking sense, or I like what they said, I'm going to listen more. I'm not looking now at what you're wearing beneath the screen. I'm looking behind the screen. And it's so new, all of this research, that really all we can go on at the moment is quite well sort of funded marketing insights about how quickly people like or dislike a website. And apparently users take less than 0.2 of a second to form a first impression. And within that 3 seconds, I've leapt on the thing that either pleases or displeases me in terms of my first impression. This is based on a Missouri University of Science exercise. And if I've glanced behind you, a scene that looks like that, and you're telling me that you feel really capable and organised and up to speed with the project right now, potentially that background is saying to me, ooh, really? Whereas if I'm looking at a background that kind of looks like that, I think, okay, yeah, I haven't heard from them for a month, but it sounds like they're on it. And that's not through the words, that's the language that has been displayed by the physical display that's behind you. So more emphasis, even more, is going to be on that 30-second intro, because of course, if there's 6 of us meeting in a first project meeting, that's the only shared first impression we've got, is how this person starts off the meeting. And what we're finding is that content travels twice as fast and people get bored and switch off twice as fast. So things that typically would have taken an hour, if you can crack through it in half an hour, that's likely to be worth a rethink in terms of duration in how we communicate. And one of the things about digital communication, it's easier to doss about when you're in a virtual environment, and that can really impact inclusion. So what happens if only the first 4 people in a team meeting continuously get asked their thoughts? And the reason why you're not asking people 5 to 16 is because you can't see them on the screen. But in a real world environment, you'd make sure that you caught tables 2 and 3, because you would see in your peripheral vision that people were starting to kind of rustle around a bit. So rethinking how to do some of our formal and informal communication is really interesting, I think, to think about at the moment, especially with wearing masks, and what does that then mean, and how we make sure that we make eye contact through the screen as well. What also might be lead us to thinking why it's worth a rethink is we're now having to hold conversations in venues that you wouldn't have dreamed of having those types of conversations in pre-March. And so my demeanour and my manner is going to set the scene and impact the outcome. Because if someone is about to be made redundant, absolutely, that would have been in page number 1 of any HR manual. Bring someone into the office and make sure that the room is set up to cater for that conversation. But now you might be having that conversation and they're sitting in a car because you're having to do it virtually. So we're having some really formal, heavyweight conversations that people are now having to deliver in potentially what seems like quite a flimsy, ephemeral, improper kind of way. And in fact, it was fascinating to read about how only a couple of days ago, these heavyweight characters here, how much influence do these 4 people have on the world? You've got the CEOs of Amazon, richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, Apple's Tim Cook, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, who knows more about you than you do, and then Sundar Pichai, who's the Google CEO, all appearing virtually, being held to account in terms of their impact running these big tech companies. That was held online. And then just thinking of that, that's quite a big trial that's happening there, or case, and all of that is kind of happening online. So there's some big conversations happening that you wouldn't dream of having them done like that way just 8 months ago. And in fact, looking at personnel today, there seems to be lots and lots of examples of where people are really upset by quite upsetting conversations that are happening in quite a carefree way because it's been done virtually. So what does that mean in terms of practically what we can take? Well, inspired by the fantastic 1 in a billion, Debbie Green, it's really opportunity to set and reset some digital housekeeping rules to create a safe virtual environment. So I'm sure the books will be written on this by this time next year, but how will I stop someone leaving a room distressed and grabbing their car keys when I'm 150 miles away from them? Because if someone was upset after a conversation in this glassy office here, you'd be able to see your teammate upset and you would meet them in the loo after and you'd have a chat. That would just be the informal thing people would do. But what happens if my teammate is based in a bedsit where literally 1 corner around is then where they've got knives and ovens and all this kind of stuff that potentially would be a risk if someone was feeling volatile and really upset about something. So we have limited ability to control the environment. It's a sensitive topic. And so what does that give? It gives me a choice. It means I either dodge it and sort of let something build because I don't want to broach it now, or actually do I need to think about how I might approach these things? The key difference is you need to create and look for cues to check that people are okay. So Debs asks a couple of key questions. In your location, you're able to speak freely and openly during this meeting. If you'd prefer, you can ask questions using the silent chat function and I can respond generally, but without showing that it was you that asked that question. Who else is with you in your location and what is happening afterwards? This may sound like a bit of an overplay in terms of this, but we all know we have seen or participated in conversations where sometimes emotions can tip over the edge. And we are the first generation in being required to use virtual venues to have what typically we wouldn't have dreamed of having those conversations over a video. People would have been flown in to have had those conversations, but now we're doing it kind of in a virtual environment. So getting creative in terms of how we use technology, using breakout rooms, etc., something that enables people to feel like they are being cared for. So the book in a nutshell, Radical Candor, written before all of this year. So hopefully that's just that little bit of kind of setting the scene just allows us to view these 5 disruptive thoughts, but maybe upcycle them a little bit so they're a bit more fit for purpose in the virtual world that's ahead of us. So it was best-selling book 2017. And she talks about the radical candor is achieved, and the reason for going for radical candor is that's what allows organisations to be productive and have pace. And what you need is you need a leadership culture where there is a correct balance between caring personally, really bothering about people, and challenging directly, not dodging stuff and leaning in and being prepared to be challenged back. That's a key thing which we'll talk about in a bit. So thought disruptor number 1. Life doesn't need to be complicated. It's a simple balancing act of care with challenge. And I love the way she just nailed it so simply. And in short, don't give out what you wouldn't want to receive in return. So this is more than just honesty, which is I'm going to be honest with you and tell you what I think. This is candor, which is we're going to have candid opening conversations where if I feel free to be able to give you some feedback, I also need to be free to receive some feedback. And she's got this lovely little kind of chart, which is this kind of axis of caring personally and not giving 2 hoots, and being challenging directly, and kind of either not challenging or doing it in a really passive aggressive way. And what this kind of gives you is these 3 kind of outcomes. So if I challenge directly but I don't give 2 hoots, then potentially I might be quite obnoxious, quite aggressive, a bit cocky in the way that I kind of interact with you. And then if you try and challenge me, I'm going to be defensive back because my wall is up. What happens if I don't care about you at all and actually I either can't be bothered or I don't want to challenge? Well, what that potentially brings in is a manipulative insincerity. 2 hot words put together, which is where I'm kind of go, yes, maybe. And then actually in real life, I'm going to do anything, the opposite of what I've just said. And what that then generates is just a sense of mistrust. I'm having to continually watch my back because I don't know where I stand. Nothing happens because people are focusing on protecting themselves rather than actually investing some risk in making things better. What happens if I care deeply about you, but I just don't feel like I can challenge directly? Then what this gets you is ruinous empathy, which is where basically I become so sorrowful by all of the stuff that might be going on that I'm just unaware of how we might be able to move on together. And again, that gets no change. Whereas if I care personally and I've got the confidence to challenge directly, wow, that's where the good stuff happens. And this idea of radical candor. So she nails it as a strong leader as the humility to listen, the confidence to challenge, and the wisdom to know when to keep quiet, which I thought was a fantastic little kind of tip for life, really. Just in terms of upcycling this to current state, her recommendation is you meet face-to-face so you can read recipients' reactions and body language. Fair enough, but many of us are maybe unable or unwilling to do that right now. So let's say you wanted to give some feedback to someone that their fly was down. So flies were down. So how would that work? Well, the radical candor approach would be, your fly's down. This one would be, oh my God, look at him, his fly's down. This one would be, oh, I was going to keep quiet because I'm really nervous about addressing this. And this one would be, I'm going to keep quiet because I'm really nervous about upsetting that person. So if we were to take this into a world of more zoomy, so what happens if you spotted something really embarrassing in someone's background? Would I actually message you privately saying, by the way, that pre-diet motivational photo of you in the swimming costume, we can all see it? Oh my God, that'd be worst nightmare. Do you message me privately? Do you do an all user so we can all see it in the chat room? Do you keep quiet because you're too nervous to tell me? Or do you keep quiet because you're worried about upsetting me? In the meantime, I'm getting hugely embarrassed. So in this Zoom, Teamsy kind of world, we're going to have to think about how we address some of these things live if we see something that actually needs a little bit of candor. So I guess the question is, how smartly have I adapted to the virtual world? And I really think about it. Thought disruptor number 2. It's not actually about you, leaders, all about you. Surface level relationships get scratched. If all I know about is my leadership culture, my leadership style, and I know nothing about the people I'm hoping to lead, then actually if it's surface level, we can get scratched really quickly. And so what she suggests is getting to know people through career conversations. And I love the very practical put. So I've visually, hopefully, just tried to put that out. And she puts a call in for a shift from talent management, which is about a 25-year-old long industry, I think, to growth management. So rather than looking at what someone is and where it can go to, it's the growth management of what might be inside that we can unlock, and creating an individual growth plan for each team member. So she has this idea of there being 2 stages of career conversations, the goal of which is to understand people's goals and then to map out a growth plan. So the first meeting might be when you're focused on someone's biography, what someone cares about and why they made certain choices. That helps you be proactive, reactive and proactive when maybe opportunities come along. The second meeting might then be once the trust has formed to describe perfect career. And she sort of paints this picture of having 3 to 5 columns of dreams that people might have. And then underneath what might be the skills that are needed and what might be some opportunities to practice and get closer to it. And I love that kind of practical bit she put out. In terms of those of us who like a theory, she kind of says that depending on where we are at in life can also influence the stage that we're in. So for whatever reason, I might be in quite a gradual growth trajectory at the moment because there's a lot going on in my life and I don't want loads of global travel. So actually I'm an excellent performer, or hope to be, but it's a gradual. I'm not looking to kind of race up the career ladder because of whatever reason might be going on. Or actually put the clock forward, things have changed a bit, I'm going to push myself and really kind of go for it. So I want some challenge as opposed to kind of the recognition. And I thought it was a really cool way of looking at sometimes people are just in the wrong role and people just need to part ways. So how well do you know what your people want? Do you know it more than Google? Because Google knows everything, hence the court trial. So thought disruptor number 3, people may shift from wanting to be rock stars or superstars. And she coins this phrase, rock stars or superstars. And now you have different drivers, motivators and energies. So once a year, she suggests you identify your rock stars and your superstars in your team. And rock stars are employees who find fulfillment in their current role. They take pride in mastering the roles they're in, and they're in a stage at the moment where they prefer gradual growth. Superstars want kind of race up the career ladder. They're looking for lots of rapid acceleration and excitement. And so how do we keep the superstars feeling showy when potentially they're on their own in a bedroom? Thought disruptor number 4, gone are the days where we have 12 months to work out what we're going to do. It's about getting stuff done. And she's got this brilliant 7-step process for getting stuff done. So for those of you who like a visual, there's lots of stuff on this online, and I really liked it as a way to maybe bring to life a team meeting. And you can join the process at any stage. And actually, Debs has said it can be really illuminating when you think to yourself, right, is this a debate conversation we're going to have? So let me enter it at this stage, to then decide what we then do, to then think who I need to persuade, to then do it, to then learn from it, to then listen more about the impact, and then clarify what's next. And I thought that was a really cool way of looking at how can we ensure our productivity and pace remains or even improves when we're working virtually, and those quality of those meetings. And the final thought disruptor is, if it's all about trust, then radical candor has got to be 2-way. I've got to be expecting to receive it back. And the caring person and the challenging directly, this really got me thinking about how you balance it. And I was gratified to see she talks lots about how we're human beings, which I think is going to be such a key sentiment in this increasingly automated decade ahead. And it's the imbalance between empathy and accountability that creates a sort of set of problems. So do we want to be like unfeeling robots, just executing communication, left, right, centre? Do we want to be totally caught up in people's personal lives and potentially counselling everyone? Or actually, is that sweet spot in the middle more of a coach environment where we're caring personally to get the best outcome for that person, but it's through challenge and the other person taking accountability? And part of that accountability, as well as me being prepared for others to point out my mistakes and suggest improvements, which you wouldn't do in a counselling setting and you wouldn't do with an app. That's the human bit that's in the middle, that balance. Are we striking the right balance for 2020 with the first generation to be tackling some of these things in some new ways? So Radical Candor, I loved the book. For her, it's about being Radically Candid, so that balance between care and challenge, and it's about delivering, receiving, fostering encouragement and correction. And as we build more for an increasingly virtual world, what does that mean in terms of the language we use and how people process some of these big conversations? So now's the time to rethink some new, refresh some current, and recycle some old ways of working, because who knows what will be facing us in the year 2023, 2024. It's time to get flexible. So some food for thought about bringing this to life, to establish some new pillars in our ways of working. The fact is unprecedented. Wow, this is a huge opportunity to reset some better precedents. The balance between care and challenge, the sweet spot is that coaching bit, accountability and questioning. We need a radical can-do attitude to think about how we demonstrate this online. This is a new world for us all. And we have to maybe work twice as hard to sense the energy through the screen. Just think about the conflict between the dress in terms of the colours it looks. Therefore, it may take more virtual sessions to create the trust, to work out the actual material that is here that needs to be put together. And do regular check-in calls, actually get beneath the superficial level. How can we make sure that we play more with each other to see different sides? Do you know how old your teammates' relations are, their favourite holiday, what makes them tick? Because guess what? The algorithms do. They are always listening to make reactive, then increasingly proactive suggestions to demonstrate a feeling of care and that I'm being looked after by the machines in our life. We've got to really work hard over the next couple of years to ensure that that human edge doesn't get taken by only algorithms that are thinking about us. We need to be thinking about each other as well. And teamship is equally part of this as leadership is, being each other's mic function. So listening to each other and watching out for things that might be useful to pick up and build. And if we don't spend time getting to know the real us, then the machines certainly are. And wouldn't it be a wonderful world where the machines are able to deal with the dull, dirty, dangerous, monotonous things that don't make us tick, freeing up more time for us to have some delicious, radically candid conversations with each other in the pursuit of looking after each other well and challenging us to have the best versions of ourselves and ultimately some phenomenal life experiences ahead of us. So this marks the end of our Summer School 2020. Wow, we've covered quite a library. So this is an opportunity to get some fresh air to our thinking and to have a consideration about what will it mean to have a really great decade ahead in life. Such an unusual way to start this year. And so stay foxy, keep flexible, and watch out for the teaser for Series 6. We're going to take some risks and hopefully it'll be the quickest half hour of your life each week. So see you soon. Take care.